Hi, thank you so much for coming. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Amy, born and raised in Taiwan, and I immigrated to the States before moving to Japan. So my legal name is actually Wanjung, not Amy. I was an ALT in Mie Prefecture before I started teaching at NUFS. This is my second year at NUFS. So today I'm going to talk about incorporating critical thinking in language classrooms. I know that many language educators are reluctant to teach critical thinking. So let's start with these two questions. So what is critical thinking, and should language educators teach critical thinking? Um, Atkinson proposed that critical thinking is actually social practice, so it imposes Western values to mainstream language learners and overlooked learners' cultural backgrounds and the cultural differences. However, Kubota then responded that with that discussion, it is actually dichotomizing Western culture to Eastern culture and draw a rigid cultural boundaries between different cultures. So she proposed that we should think about this from post-colonial and post-structuralist perspectives. She then introduced Campbell's critical multiculturalism model. Okay. So instead of teaching critical pedagogy to mainstream L2 students or language educators just give up on their own cultures to understand the language learners, Campbell encouraged learners and educators to recognize and respect cultural differences and diversity. And through this model, it actually provides critical investigation on understanding of the differences, including historical and political aspects, in hope to help L2 learners and educators to understand the differences and to struggle with the differences, to then leading to transformation of something new. So this is to say, it rejects to be limited to the mainstream cultural codes, nor be liberal without knowing why the differences are constructed. So let's actually go back to the question. So what is critical thinking anyways? So Atkinson indicated that these terms are interchangeable: critical thinking, higher order thinking skills, problem solving, reasoning, rationality, and it's actually indicated the same thing. Elder and Paul also defines critical thinking as the ability of thinkers to take charge of their own thinking. It therefore requires a high degree of continual self-reflection and intellectual discipline. Fostering students to be critical leads to their intellectual autonomy, civility, and humility, and etc. So when I design lessons and design activities, I kept asking myself, does critical thinking help language learners in language learning? And does critical thinking help the language learners to be more confident and motivated? Okay, so now I am going to introduce the lessons and the courses I teach. So I teach 3 integrated skills English classes at NUFS. For 2 courses, we meet twice a week. And I have been experimenting some ideas throughout my 2 years at NUFS. And for critical thinking, luckily, we started to use prism reading for one of the courses. Prism reading introduced Bloom's taxonomy, and I found it easy for students to understand. So for all my courses, I explained what critical thinking skills with some real life situations and indicated that they are actually using those skills all the time, including questioning their own prime minister. And now we're just going to use the skills in class. And I found that students can actually take it really well. So I encourage them to not stay at the remembering and understanding level. And in class discussions and activities, the words evaluate, analyze, apply, and create are especially repeated again and again, multiple times in class to encourage the students to remember the skills. So my goals are as follows. First, to foster students to find reasons and to make sense of their own opinions. And number two, to develop students' accountability. Well, since a lot of the activities, well, all of the activities are done in groups, so they can keep each other accountable. And number three, to explore more English vocabulary and ways of writing and speaking. And number four, to evaluate and apply information that they receive. And then to number five, analyze and reflect on their own stories. Number one, question asking. For all of my classes, reading are used for topic exploration. So when students read, I always encourage them to interact with the text. So rather than just read through the article and answer comprehension questions, I ask them to highlight, to comment, and pose questions. So comments and questions are simple, as easy as, seriously? This is interesting. Oh, I didn't know that. When was this written? Where did the author get the information? How about the situation in Japan? So they can ask any kinds of questions when they read. And as Singer explained, teacher questions or textbook questions usually aim for memory of the text. However, student questions actually guide them to think. So he encouraged educators to allow students to read to satisfy their own curiosity. For each unit, I have what I called in-class handout for the students. So they will record what they learned and the questions that they had. So in all reading classes, I also have sharing time for them to share their questions and comments about the reading. So they can actually learn in groups and explore the topics together. Of course, with that, necessary phrases are provided to help them to express. So here are some example questions that students asked. Students can actually ask many different kinds of questions. So some questions are for definition or for clarification. Some questions are more reflective. Some are more connected to their own prior knowledge or their own stories. And some are more conditional or predicting for the future. And later, as assignment, the students will choose one question from their question pools and research for answers on the internet. And of course, I also encourage them to research first. And if they can't find answers for that particular question, just they can say that honestly in the assignment and just change the way of asking the question and then research again. So since the research questions are not directly connected to the readings, students, especially at this part, they are actually using more variety of English words and phrases in summarizing their research. So these are two research questions from my students. And this is what I just mentioned that she couldn't find the answer, but blah, blah, blah. Then, at the end of the assignment, I will list up a few questions for them to express their opinions. They only need to choose one and answer in a short paragraph. However, all the questions are discussed in class in different kinds of discussion questions or debate topics. For their presentations, I also asked them to ask questions. So after each presentation, they need to have a 2 minutes Q&A time. And for audience, I asked them to take notes and listen actively. And then they also need to think of the questions to ask while listening, because if they actually think of the questions afterwards, it takes more time to think, and the questions are usually less connected to the presentation content. The presenters will then take questions. In the beginning, many students told me in their reflections that they were really nervous because they weren't sure if they know how to answer their friends' questions. So I noticed that students felt that they needed to know everything and that they needed to have the correct answers, but they actually didn't need to. Yet it's a good experience to know what they know and what they don't know, and for them to understand that it is okay to not know something. Then I introduce them some phrases and frames to empower them by saying, "Oh, that is a good question. I didn't research that part, but I think." Then they can share their opinions. Students later told me that they felt more confident and more comfortable when they received their friends' questions because they feel that their friends are very curious and interested in their topics. So I'm really encouraged to see the change. So many students think that asking questions means questioning authority. It means that the textbook is wrong. Or the students actually think that if they ask questions after presentations, that means their friends did not prepare enough. So, and also, of course, they don't want their friends to lose face. At a very different case, I also hear students saying that I think your presentation was really good, so I have no questions. So I realized that in different situations, different students actually have different kinds of ideas and understandings about question asking. So I have to emphasize multiple times that asking questions is to show that they are curious about the presentation, about the topic, about the textbook, not because that there is lack of information. Another challenge is that students don't know how to ask questions that are based on the presentation content. So a lot of the time, some students will just ask, why did you choose this topic? Of course, it's a good question as well, but I would like them to know some questions are more connected to the presentation and some are not. So one of the questions on my presentation survey, what reflection survey, is for them to identify if their question is more connected to the presentation or not. So they can ask questions and at the same time identify what kind of questions they are. At the same time, of course, I showed them that they can actually quote their friend's presentation and then ask questions. So this actually raised their motivation because they know that the listeners are very interested into the topic. The last one is that some students don't really know the difference between questions that are good for discussion and questions that are actually good for research. Another activity I used a lot are debates. So I had a very casual debate activity in class, and I play all the time. So the students will be paired up. They play rock, scissors, paper, and the student who wins would agree with the statement, this statement here. And students who loses would disagree with the statement. They don't get to choose. In the beginning, students are not very sure how to pose a different opinion or how to negotiate or how to argue with their friends. So I provided a few phrases for them to use to facilitate the debate activity, and they really enjoyed it. Another activity was a grouped debate activity. I only used it in Advanced Core English, which is for the second year. And this is actually designed by Jared, Niall, and myself together. So this is a collaborative activity. And before the debate, we announced different roles, and the students will research as assignment. And then on the debate day, we will have some discussion time before the real debate. Here are some examples. So, for example, for transportation, the debate was about how to improve um, traffic congestions in Nagoya. And students have different roles, and one student is Mayor Kawamura. And for costumes and traditions, is planning a wedding together as a group. And for health and fitness, Jared actually designed this activity where students would argue and negotiate if the government should tax products that are bad for our health. And for Unit 6, it's Discovery and Invention. And the textbook actually have a video about a Chinese project. So I use that to design this debate activity. And then for fashion, it's also from Jared that he designed a topic about an eco-friendly mall in Japan would like to take in 2 more shops, and then the representatives have to negotiate and debate and fight to get the 2 spots. So let me use Unit 6 as an example. So like I said, in the unit, we watched a video about an artificial river project in China, which was a project to bring water from the south to the north. And the video is included in the textbook and we watched it in class together. And we discussed about the advantages and disadvantages already. Then I announced different roles that students will play, and then I will dismiss the class. So they will think about their short argument or even research before the debate day. So you can see different roles that they have to play. And by nature, the head politician is the moderator of the group. So on the debate day, students at the same rows will be put to the same group for some group discussion first for their preparation for the debate. And then I will put students from different rows to one group, and this is their real debate. Of course, there are a lot of challenges as well because preparation is needed. So the students, sometimes they told me that they are kind of discouraged because their group members didn't want to talk or their group members didn't want to debate. So it wasn't fun for them. So the challenge is that all the members need to be active. Otherwise, even the motivated students will be discouraged. So I had a survey in summer 2020, which is after 1 semester of the curriculum design, and only about question asking part, not about the debate. So the survey, I actually got 49 responses, and only the second year and third year students were surveyed. As you can see from the results, that many students think that asking questions is difficult, but they also think that it helps them to be curious and be interested in the topics. And also researching about their topics is definitely not an easy task, but it is quite interesting for the majority of the students. In terms of vocabulary use, it did not show significance if students were given opportunities to use a variety of English vocabulary when they have critical thinking skills. Yet they were becoming more confident than before. Here are some responses to the question, what did you learn the most from critical thinking skills? So many students have really good and positive responses that they get to think deeper from different kinds of angles and perspectives, and their interest and their curiosity was met. And also, a student said that I was able to use English words that I usually did not use. And also another student said that gaining specialized knowledge enriches my life. So students are actually connecting what they learned in class to their life and to their own stories. And even one student said that I realized that thinking deeply means being able to know what I really feel. So this is really encouraging because learning English is not something not related to themselves anymore, but they are a way to express their own feelings just by practicing critical thinking skills. The next question is, how do you feel about yourself when you can think deeper in certain topics? Many students have very positive responses, even though if it's difficult, but they felt confident, they felt enthusiastic, excited, knowledgeable, educated, smart, and they actually had sense of accomplishment and fulfilled. Some students even indicated that it was their first time learning how to say no and learning that it's okay to say no when they share their opinions. And it's okay to say that they disagree with other people. So for some of them, they felt that they were more proud of themselves and they're becoming more mature. And it's also very encouraging to see that students are trying to learn more advanced vocabulary. So some students also said that they felt really good about learning critical thinking skills and they are more confident. And a student even said that it's necessary for Japanese students to learn how to think critically in all schools. So this is actually very encouraging to see. So overall, I think it is quite positive that the students really enjoyed it and it does work on their confidence and also how they can actually think about different topics and relate it to their lives. So there are a few things that I think that I will continue working on. For the first one, it was about summarizing because students are really struggling with it. And also I'm curious about their emotions and feelings when they use the skills into their life, especially when they reflect on their own life, and also their autonomy in learning English, and also the group dynamics when we use the different skills and how would that change the group dynamics. Here are my references, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you so much.